Welcome to the ODD Collective Radio Show, and where the agendas are only to tell our stories our way. We're an eclectic group of hosts deliver a different show every Sunday. The show is produced by Ever Beyond Radio and broadcasted over Wolf Spirit Radio Network. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our worlds. Now.
Excellent. Okay, hello everybody. This is Neil Akash, speaking from Wolf Spirit Radio. I have with me Nora Willow. Nora, you here?
Yes, hello. Hi Neil, hi everyone, hi JP. Nice to be back on the ODD Collective.
Yeah.
Oh, hang on. I need to bring you back into the call.
Okay.
Okay, right.
Are you here?
Yeah, sorry about that. Org just tried to connect and he came in on a different thing. So let's see if we can bring him into this call. There we go. Add to call.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about him while JP does that? Neil?
Sure, good idea.
Oh, that's not a good idea because I have been...
Oops, you put him on the spot and he's got no data.
That's all right. I'm prepared for it, trust me, because I knew I was going to come to this. Basically, I ran into him all of a sudden through a friend of mine on Facebook from India, and she sent me some links of his video that I watched, and I was in awe. And the way I felt was, this is the next leap in consciousness for me since Andrew Bartzes. And I'm pretty sure most of our common audience, regular frequenters, know about Andrew Bartzes, who claims to be the galactic historian, and he can read the Akashic records, and he also does personal, what do you call those? Healing sessions.
Readings and healings, yeah.
Readings and healings, correct. Thank you, JP. Anyway, so back to Og, and I listened to him, and he's this young fella with long hair and long beard, spewing relentless, what we call spiritual intel. This is about This was very interesting for me that somebody would have so much inside knowledge about our reality and the secret stuff that happens, which we are trying to disclose as much as we can. And so as I listened to his video blogs, I didn't know what his name was because he hardly ever mentions it. So it was a little bit difficult for me to find out about his background and what his name really was. Eventually I found him on Facebook, and then we briefly spoke. But what I will do is Og here yet, JP?
Right, my issue is that the version of Sky... Oh, right, he is on Linux, all right.
Oh, okay.
I will call Linux. Stand by. He's got a Linux system, and so I'm going to have to bring him in on the other. Right, but
all right, take his time.
Yeah. So, how's everything been going? How's your New Year's, you guys? I mean,
yeah.
Where were you for New Year, Nora, for instance?
You sure you want to know? Because it's a sad story.
Oh, you were alone. Oh, bless your heart.
Yes. Actually, I was supposed to, I had a couple of plans. First of all, for Christmas, I was supposed to go visit my family. And I got very ill. So practically I was in bed for almost 2 weeks, having to force myself to go to work. And it was very cold. Then for New Year's, my friend was supposed to come. Then she couldn't, so I spent it all by myself looking at the fireworks from the balcony. That sounds pathetic. No, but to be honest, I had a good time. I mean, it was nice. I enjoyed it. It was nice. Just unfortunately, the illness that I got was quite strong. So yeah, it kind of destabilized me and immobilized me. I just couldn't do anything. But yeah, all in all, it was okay. So not very exciting. I'm sorry, JP.
Oh, well, I mean, it was about as exciting as my New Year's Eve, which was probably very, very much the same. I was out, normally, there are firework displays here in Scotland at midnight. And, so I live in the middle, I live about 7 miles from about 3 towns, right in the middle of them. And so, my New Year's Eve is just, I stand out in the garden, I watch the fireworks from one side to the other and to the other, and then I go in. Last year was more spectacular actually because we had the firework displays and we had Northern Lights at the same time. That was pretty spectacular. Good
Oh
display.
wow,
Yeah,
that's
really
beautiful.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Did
I ever tell you my story of the Northern Lights? Not that I want to change the subject, but because they're so fascinating to me. I saw them from the sky when I was on the airplane. We were flying over Iceland, and at the time I was working as a cabin crew, and the captain knew how much I loved them, so he called me and said, "I have a surprise for you." And I said, "What's going on?" He called me into the cockpit and said, "The captain, the first captain was resting, so I sat on his chair." And the second pilot was like, just wait. And then suddenly these beautiful green lights were right in front of us in the pitch darkness. I actually teared up. I was so much in awe. It was, my God. So yeah, they're quite special. I think people who can see them are very privileged.
That's beautiful.
I've never seen them.
Well, they're beautiful, Neil. I mean, whenever you have the chance.
I just have one question. How did the captain know about your curiosity with
you know what? That's a smart. Oh no, because I shared it with him. We were talking about it. He would tell me the things that he would see. Obviously, I asked him, "Did you ever see UFOs?" And he laughed. Never gave me an answer.
They're not allowed
I was
to.
Just trying to be funny.
Yeah. Oh, they're not allowed to.
No. It's like a bit of a there's a culture. Very much like
Right.
you'd find in the police or the military that stuff. You'll get sacked if you speak out. Basically, you lose your job because people will, and even though these are real things, and they're probably Nazis as well, but even though they're real things, if you speak about them, you get you sacked.
Okay. Yeah. So because he did laugh, but he did not say yes or no.
That's right.
So I was like,
that's
okay.
a no comment.
No comment. He was an American pilot from Las Vegas. He was a nice guy. But yeah, I told him that I love, the Northern Lights and I would love to see them. It's been always my wish, but it never happened. So he was like, "Come upstairs." It was a double decker, the Boeing 747 with the two. So yeah, it was a beautiful gift. But yeah, anyway, I've kind of compensated the whole Christmas New Year thing, so I went this weekend to my family, and we had a good time. Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Awesome.
So we exchanged gifts. It was good.
Super.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Neil? What did you do for New Year's?
No big deal. Hung out with a couple of friends, had some alcohol. That was it. Partied.
Sounds good.
Alcohol?
For me.
Alcohol?
Yes, sir.
You have alcohol in India?
Well, it was cheap alcohol though, because it was
what do you have? What do they make it from?
This is probably some local product that we could manage.
Moonshine, yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, some very, very low grade, and it's different over here in Dhaka. Okay, this is not the United States.
Oh, I'm in Scotland, man. We burn whiskey barrels and drink the whiskey out of that. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, just like in Saudi Arabia, they make local stuff. That's very bad for you.
Well, they call it hand chopper.
Absolutely. This will give you bad headaches.
Actually, I'll tell you something. That's kind of what turned me off of alcohol, because the first time I drank in Saudi, I drank before like good wine in Italy, but in Saudi, the first time I had that stuff they make, and I felt very, very sick. It was bad. I started like throwing up. I felt really, really sick.
Oh man.
And I think that turned me off. Good. And right now, I drink very, very rarely, just with people socially, but I don't really go looking for it. So in a way it was positive. You know, that stuff can blind you.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's got what sounds like it's got a lot of wood methanol in it,
I think so, yeah.
which is
It's poison.
yeah, very much, very much. Oh, by the way, yeah. So let's. No, I won't even.
Let's get Og in.
Well, no, because Og is just he's getting his situation together. He's downloading. Oh my God, he's having to download a sound driver. Hang on, let me. Can you call him by phone? Where is Og? Is he in the States?
Yeah, he should be.
Well, we can call him by phone. 775-773-3431, and that's it. That will bring. We'll try and get him in.
Yeah,
He's
sure.
But anyway, meanwhile, we were talking about. Well, you were talking about booze and. Dodgy booze. Side. Yeah, we're always talking about Craig in England, and he's always drinking cider. And like when my dad was Canadian, and when he came over in the Second World War, he went to a pub, and he was in the southwest of England, and he said, "Can I have some of your beer?" And they said, "We have cider." He said, "All right, well, I'll have a pint of that." But it was scrumpy. It wasn't just ordinary cider, it was scrumpy cider, which is like sort of moonshine. It's really strong, and it's really thick, and it's really like
cool stuff, man.
You don't want to wake up in the morning after that. So my dad he was a small guy, he was like 5'6", and so didn't have much of a body mass index to cope with all this booze. He was flat on the floor. Very
Oh my God.
Poor love. Anyway, so yeah, we traditionally can't take our booze. I mean, he's got a bit of Red Indian in him. Ah, yay, oh no, that doesn't work. Hang on. No, I've got to call you back. God.
But
sorry, I got, Og called in and it broke again. Let's see if I can bring him on that.
Yeah, you'll make it.
Meanwhile. Hang on, let's have a quick meanwhile.
JP, we were before the booze thing.
There we go. Og,
Oh.
we're in the call. We have Og, we have Neil, we have Nora. I will step back. Thank you very much. Hurrah, hurrah, hurrah.
Thank you, JP. Oh, you there?
I spoke too soon.
Oh my goodness.
Can you unmute yourself, Og?
Yeah. He gets interrupted pretty badly. He told me some of it.
So he is in the call, and presumably Og can hear us. But we can't hear you yet, Og. So, well, you might as well start talking about Christmas again.
Yeah, hey Og, just in case you can hear us, good to have you here. Hopefully we can hear you soon. Before the booze thing, we were talking about self-censorship of pilots and military people. So that's how we keep things undercover, right? So we censor ourselves, those who are in the know. In order to keep our jobs, we have to keep our mouth shut and pretend that we don't know. So this is how it's done. Excuse me. Interestingly enough, some people from Bangladesh that I talk to and try to tell them about the disclosures and stuff, they keep on repeating one sentence: show us some proof. And I give them this, give them that, declassified documents from CIA, FBI.gov, repository, etc., etc. But these people come back and tell me the same thing. Give us some proof, not literature. So I don't know what to say after that. So I'm going to ask Og about this. How do you deal with people that just won't accept anything as evidence or proof of anything? So that's one of the things that I want to ask.
Okay, so let's put that on the list. Now, I'm sorry, I just have to. We interrupt this broadcast. Org needs to reboot his computer.
Okay.
All right. So, but
JP, you're part of this show too, so there's no interruption.
Well, I do try to say allow other people to speak. But anyway, so Org actually just put into the chat because he can hear us, but he's just rebooting. But he says you have to speak to them on the level that they want to know the truth, and I think that's a very important thing. Is to people have what seems to be a very kind of low tolerance for anything out of the ordinary. So you have to go a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time and really make them think and cause them to answer their questions. You rephrase, if they have a question, you rephrase it. Like, for instance, all right, so they say, all right, I won't believe this until I get proof. All right. So you have to then quiz them. All right. What constitutes proof? Right. Is a document proof? Is a photograph proof? Is a piece of metal proof? Because you'll never get the piece of space age metal. You never get that. Because that's the guy in the X-Files down in the basement of the Pentagon. That's where all those pieces are held.
Right.
So you're not going to get that kind of proof. So what do your people want from, how do you get proof? How do you find proof? What is proof? What constitutes proof?
Right. JP, I have a question for you. Right now, the world pretty much is busy with the inauguration of Donald Trump, the President of the United States. So that's big. But given the context, what do you feel? Hey, Og.
Yay. Stand by, Og. Given the context.
Okay. All right. Yeah, context. JP, can you help me out here?
Well, you started a sentence. You asked me a question. You started me begin, given the context, and then you stop. So
yeah, I was gonna ask JP the question that what would you consider to be a good, valid discussion topic for tonight's show right now?
I would like to listen to what Og has to say because I've only heard him once or twice, and I know he knows a lot about stuff, lots of stuff. So
yeah, he does.
Yeah,
we got a lot of topics.
Right. We got lots of time, we got lots of topics, and we got lots of stuff. I'll go and get the canapes, and would you like a nice Merlot with that, Nora?
Oh, I'm actually having my Christmas cake that I just got today. So.
You actually, I have to say, there is one thing that I really, really like about Christmas, and that's Christmas pudding, the very thick, rich plum fruit pudding. And I didn't have any this year with brandy cream, so I did miss out on Christmas, I have to say. Anyway. So,
well, I thought I was going to miss out too, but it seems apparently right now I'm not.
Excellent. So, you have three-way conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Welcome, Og.
Let's introduce our guest, our very special guest, Og Tellez. And I'm very, very happy and honored to have you here, Og. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, is my sound okay?
Yeah,
lovely.
I can hear you pretty well.
Okay. I don't want it to kind of gets overblown sometimes. Yeah, that was a bunch of, man, my head's hurting. And I was just power napping a little bit ago too.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing me on. You can hear me good?
Yeah.
Okay. There is basically a large portion of my experiences as well as the information having to do with the military projects, the Sonic Knowledge Special Access Programs, I often call them the secret projects. This goes into mind control, psychological manipulation, genetic engineering, and technology, electrolytic consciousness transfer, a whole bunch of stuff. And then where this kind of connects into the spiritual realm, healing, the true nature of consciousness, and the origins of humanity is basically, as far as these projects, is how they develop their understanding and discover is what it's called. I gotta mute my speakers because I'm getting feedback here. But is what's
Yeah, sorry. If either of the hosts could use headphones or mute their mic, Control and M will mute their mic while Org is speaking. I can hear it. It's kind of bouncing back. Yeah, sorry about that, Org.
That's cool. And so extends all the way from there. I kind of give this this breakdown fairly regularly when I introduce people. So there are these control situations, manipulation, testing, basically a military program, to not have to go too far into that. But what they discovered is basically what they call the galactic history of Earth and humanity. And it basically goes as far as you can possibly conceive outside of mundane reality at the very beginning, as soon as you have to comprehend what's going on. And that has to do with the nature of basically humanity and consciousness, with the universe basically being this type of holographic reflection of more or less what's within us. And it's a big, very complex situation, but I'll stop there for the introduction.
Excellent. All right, thanks. I have one question right off the bat. When you say holographic universe, this term gets thrown around a lot. But can you tell us a little bit more what this means in technical terms, not without getting too technical?
Well, I'll try not to get too technical, although it is fairly fun at least, and maybe the easiest way to begin to understand it in those terms, where it's basically the electrical or electromagnetic information of the brain through the like the sodium ion channels of the neurons. We're taught to believe that that's where consciousness stems from, that the brain generates consciousness. Basically, the way I was brought into this and informed, and based upon our experiences, and a lot of people outside of these projects have these same understandings, even people like Tesla or a lot of these maybe kind of mystics or ancient religions. Although anywhere that the beginnings of the truth goes to the public, it gets covered up. And so there's deception everywhere. And part of this is kind of a rather manipulative control system, as well as to preserve the society, the civilization that we have, because as soon as the truth does come out, then it changes everything forever. Because right now we're in this type of, the way we see things, the way we're kind of informed, it's basically akin to a dream. That's the amount of, that's the correspondence. And once people get the truth, the beginnings of the truth, the dream begins to kind of turn into a reality, and it's very intense. But we have the way it was broken down more or less is that we have these electrical impulses and stimuli, and all these biochemical neuronal processes in the brain and the body, and they even extend out of the body in these electromagnetic waves. And so the idea is that the way the brain works, the way it produces consciousness is not a part of the organism. It is not one part of the brain that you have, and you have the core of consciousness there, and even the body itself, because you have nerves going all throughout, and electrical stimulus and impulses going all throughout the body, and you can't, chop off a finger, for lack of a better example, and say that now, a piece of you and your consciousness is gone. It's just a representation. And so to break it down even further, and this is kind of gruesome, but that's where our psychology comes from, because they were always basically chopping people up, and since the beginning of time, and figuring out what does work and what doesn't work. Or they would find somebody, who had an accident at work, maybe building one of these ancient sites, and he got hit over the head and some part of his brain was damaged, and so they went and either, hopefully after he died much later, they looked at what part of the brain was damaged and said, well, this part of his vision was blocked out, and this part of the brain had blood, clotting all over it. So therefore this part of the brain must be responsible for this part of this function of the body. And therefore the consciousness of the person, the function. And it goes all the way through a personality development and these higher functioning of personality and consciousness, emotions, and then physiological changes and adaptation and memory and things like that. And we have a very developed version of that now, because now you can just use MRI imaging to see what's going on without even looking in there. But basically, if somebody loses a part of their brain, the brain is malleable and they don't become entirely unconscious. If you lose the majority of it or some of the, major functioning portions or too much, basically, over a critical amount, then consciousness doesn't work anymore. But there's, if you've been on the internet, you've seen some of these examples where people are missing almost half their brain and their consciousness is still there. They're still capable of functioning and not in a completely, devoid of intellect manner. They're still regular functioning people. And, maybe these are extreme cases, but it still happens. And so if it happens once, then that means instantly they're not magical and they have a third brain or second brain in their, and we're supposed to have three brains anyway with the electrical system. But, they don't have a hidden brain somewhere. It's just that the brain is malleable, and in the same sense, consciousness is more of it's an all or nothing, like in the neuronal firing, or it is a collective result of the entire functioning of every different part. So it's not one part or another, it's an overall effect. And we go to understand this as a type of holographic representation, or at least a way of explaining it, because holography works in the same sense, where you can have a piece of a whole in terms of maybe a holographic disc. If you break the holographic disc like a brain or a piece of the body, in each portion of the disc, you'll have a whole image, or the image of the whole picture. So in the same sense, you can remove a portion of the brain or the body, and what was contained within that removed portion will be readapted into another portion of the body and the brain. And so that's the basic understanding of the holographic function or dynamic of it. The other is basically that there's a mirroring effect of our own consciousness and the stimuli that we experience out in the world, to the degree where it's basically like a fractal reflection system where we can't have one or the other. You have to have consciousness and the world around us that mirrors our consciousness back to us. And it goes very kind of extravagantly into this almost hard to explain concepts, but basically the consciousness that we perceive as the ego form as specifically and distinctly, definitely separate from the world, or a portion of ourselves separate from one other portion of ourselves, that aspect of it is an illusion. It's kind of like a dream separated by, waking moments where it's real and it happens and the difference can be experienced, but in the end of everything, when it all comes back together, the differences are less important than the similarities, and they're actually just a type of illusory distinction designed or made or just there so that we can function in this way of basically having a one ego, one self and personality. And ultimately that self and that one personality seems to be on a type of journey of merging back into this collective whole. And so the piece of the fractal disc, just like the brain of the consciousness, then merges back into this whole holographic image of the whole universe. And so we're kind of a slice of the whole universe in this type of fractal holographic manner. To make it as simple as I could put it.
Okay.
I'd like to say something. Hi, Og. It's nice to meet you. I'm Nora. And that was very well said. Quite amazing. But I just have one little question for you. More simply, would it be something like what, for example, David Icke would say, that he kind of put it in more simple terms, which would be decoding information? Because at the end, everything is information. Would that be what you're saying in a more simplistic way?
This is part of it, yes.
Part of it.
So you're looking at the holographic consciousness, or the consciousness, the electromagnetic consciousness is the aspect that is decoding the information. And it is not separate from the source of the information itself. It's just kind of tangled up within us, and we have that perceived difference. And so the idea, though, is that the consciousness is electromagnetic, and it is therefore holographic and connected to what is being made
Projected.
aware of.
Okay.
Right. And the idea is that awareness is what is being aware of the consciousness. Your consciousness is within the brain and body and is aware of the world. Your awareness is aware of your consciousness being aware of those things, or being conscious of those experiences, the stimuli and all these things. And so consciousness has a form reflective of what is being experienced. Awareness has no identity, no shape, no form.
Yeah, it's just like saying being the observer and the experiencer at the same time.
That is exactly the idea. And then there are just very technical ways they kind of zap people into these different states and use these devices to basically make sure of it, that that's what's really going on, and that's not a trick within itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other question, Nora?
For now, no. I'm just quite
Okay.
mesmerized. That's all.
Yeah,
That was really good.
I know that feeling. I'm very familiar with it. The question I have for you is what you just described about the holographic nature of our reality. Is this knowledge coming from your military background? Where do you get this? Obviously, you have a very deep knowledge, but this seems like it's an overlap of spiritual, esoteric, and maybe military technology. Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
Yeah, and I can't really say that I developed it because I always figured that I did develop, and a lot of people do, and a lot of it I did. But because I was introduced and involved in these situations so early on, that my understanding of the universe was forever linked from there on. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how, it's how it works and how life kind of goes. And I kind of had the observer, experiencer duality down packed when I was younger, as far as how, going into that is a more philosophical way of defining it, where it's kind of about selfhood and the other self and the conscious mind, which is aware of reality and the experience in the now, and then the duality between that and the unconscious mind, which is the experiences that we contain throughout all other nows and is kept stored within our memory and our what we call the unconscious mind. And that our personality is an interplay between the two halves, basically like light and dark. And I didn't really call it light and dark, and I still don't. But you can see obviously those are connected to these esoteric knowledges, these Gnostic understandings from way back in the day. And you see how the person who ignores too much of that hidden aspect becomes a slave to it, because that aspect will always take control of their life, and they'll call it suffering. And the person who achieves harmony and balance between these conscious and unconscious aspects can then utilize their talents as well as the unexpected, maybe unpredictable or undesirable aspects of experience and benefit from it and grow from it. And so I kind of always was looking at it that way, through the idea of time, the past, present, and future, the trinity of understanding and emotions, mind, and body. And as a child, I would do that a lot. I would draw out these like diagrams and ponder these things for a long time. When later on, basically, I reached what they call an awakening in 2010. And that was a really weird experience. It's kind of hard to describe. I'm getting to the point where I'm going to talk about it fully now. So from our perspective, I don't even know how deep I should go, but so it has to do with time travel, basically, and heavily involved with time travel and moving in between planes. And so, but there they kind of helped me out the way I would talking to people, kind of like in this situation right here. And this was through their technologies, and how the best way to basically describe it and define it based upon what had been described all throughout history, from these ancient texts on consciousness and reality of the soul and awareness and higher and lower and right and left brain and heaven and hell, duality and transcendence, all these ideas, these concepts, and how it really can be understood to a definitive manner using this technology. And it's not that the technology is used, but the results that you can find with this technology. Say you can see it on a chart, and you can test one person, they get this result, and you test another person, it's the exact same result. Well, at that point, you're not sitting down and everybody's, having a cup of tea and a really deep conversation about it. You're literally checking the nature of reality and consciousness using technology and science. It's basically scientific methods for these mystical aspects that we really haven't been able to find in public, and it's pretty much because if people figured out what was going on, that we're basically the universe inverted, like we're literally a puppet, I can't think of the word, but like a hand puppet, where that for the entire universe, each one of us, which is really weird, and the power that a person can have to create their own reality and to develop their self and things like that. And then what's resisting that and this type of spiritual rough upbringing that humanity is going through. So they did help with organizing a certain concept basis to formulate a kind of more thorough and well-defined and ordered understanding so that it could be explained a little bit more directly and easily.
So I just have another question. Now, what you just said kind of triggered a question in me. So you're basically saying, part of what you're saying is that, obviously we as consciousness have the power to create our reality, whether we create it positively or not positively. So the powers that be, or whatever is kind of introverting things or turning them upside down, because you always have, the concepts can be, anything that is dark, if I can use that word, is kind of introverted. So are they kind of using that? How can I ask the question? Because it's a little complicated. I can't formulate it. Are they using our power to create reality against us?
Yeah, and maybe an easier way to look at it is that they remain. Well, it's not even. We don't want to get into they.
Yeah.
It's just that certain people in power remain in power only when people still believe that the system that basically takes power away from them is legitimate. And so it's inevitable that won't work forever. But you could basically say there are no laws in the universe other than the spiritual laws that we're experiencing right now, where everyone basically has their choice of their free will of learning and consenting to learning, or choosing more or less ignorance and suffering by not knowing their self and not doing that work, spiritual work, and experiencing the consequences, the suffering of that. It kind of goes into the Hermetic principles. Mm-hmm. And so they're taking advantage of that, and this is kind of like a mini brigade, if you will, of lording over a human population, because the inevitable is that people wake up, to the reality of this dream, and which is not a dream, but the power is kind of like that, and they're just taking their time to delay that as much as possible, because this is the only type of situation where you can have such power where that works. And the other aspect of that is that it's a form of more or less perversion to want power in that way, to want that type of control over other people, because you can get anything you need in the world by simply going out and getting it. You don't need to lord over a group, a village, a family, a tribe, whatever it is. You don't have to do that to get the power. In doing that is within doing that itself. They're not getting anything, by doing that. No items, no anything. They're getting the power from lording over people, by lording over people. But again, if people can't see that and they really think, well, oh no, it's about this, and they're just doing this, for that, so they can have this, and somebody else is going to do it, well, then they're going to continue to give their power away. And the other end of that is that they're basically offering people, as strangely and, morbid as it sounds, they're offering people the chance to say no to evil, to blowing each other up, to going to war with each other over resources that come out of the ground anyway, to choosing differences of color and origin and a flag and a borderline that somebody invented, overseeing the similarities of the fact that we are literally 99% the same, DNA for the most part. And then that's the other aspect, that there are basically, as a result of projects and as a result of the specific nature in which these so-called origins and the galactic history of humanity comes about or came about, is that there are non-humans on this planet. There are humanoid beings, and there are non-human entities. And so then part of that control system, at least part of it, is in order to contain that deception, because the other end of that, if it is revealed before people can handle the truth, is basically worse than the situation that we're looking at now. So it's a very tricky, slippery slope type of situation here, but ultimately it's about self-development and spiritual development and regaining our power and handling our own spiritual flow, and then
taking responsibility.
Right.
I have like a gazillion questions. Neil, please.
No, go for it, Nora.
No, I mean, because you said something about, you're talking about entities and obviously, these extraterrestrials, non-humans that live among us. But now, I don't want us to kind of shift the subject because there are so many things we can talk about, but I just want you to give us a little bit of your own input and thoughts about how religion plays into this. The whole idea of non-human entities living amongst us, covertly. How does that reflect on religion? Talking about angels and demons and just that whole aspect. Is there confusion here? Is it mixed up with different names? Just give us a bit of your knowledge on that, if you can.
That was to me, right?
Yes, that was you.
So this is probably a tougher one than the previous question. It's kind of like a wild card. So basically, I can refer.
You knew we were going to ask you that.
Oh yeah. I can refer to the early Gnostic texts, and at the same time, kind of reference that a lot of what we have today that we call religion is gleaned from these early texts. And a lot of the religion that we are seeing today is part of this spiritual control system. I don't want to knock religion altogether because there are followings and understandings placed into the category of religion that are also containing basically the pathway out of that deception. But that's part of the deception where they put the truth with the lies. Even some of these religions that are more or less kind of being used for distraction purposes, there's truth in those religions. It's just presented in a way that brings people externally and causes them to want to organize themselves in accordance with a man-made series of spiritual structures, basically, instead of going within and producing the required spiritual work and developing their self basically manually. People are looking for and instant gratification. But with that, basically, for instance, some of these religions will tell people what not to do. The early version, since we're going to speak on inversion and the inverted psychologically manipulative construct of, inverted consciousness, we can say that the early texts that these were based off of told people what to do. They when you tell a kid, don't touch the stove, that's when they burn themselves in the stoves. That's how that works. So the idea of turning these ideas into what not to do is an inversion of the original knowledge that told people what to do. And the knowledge of telling them what to do was basically a way to refine one's energy and explore the self in a harmonious manner and basically unveil the human soul, the eternal soul, or at least the immortal soul, whereas awareness may be eternal or everlasting. It cannot be destroyed, but a soul, it can be destroyed given enough improper motions. And so the Gnostic texts, where religion goes into these entities and what's going on, the Gnostic texts talk about this, and this is basically pretty much the important part of what's going on. And this is what I mentioned earlier as far as the non-human entities and this deception system being used to, contain this problem, whereas there's basically a mind virus in the conscious holographic ether of humanity. And how it got here is a very strange story. A series of stories, strange stories. But how it proliferates is basically like a viral holographic load that travels through electromagnetic waves and inhabits lower consciousness vibrations and emotional patterns, basically deception and lower self-awareness, lack of awareness. And so So everything about religion, trying to preserve the human soul is about this ancient spiritual battle that began with the introduction of this mind virus, this holographic viral code in our civilization. However, it did, happen to get here. And
tell us about that, well, if you don't mind. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. And so the rest, though, as far as the Gnostic understanding of the world, some of these early Christian understandings of heaven and hell and the angels and demons and these refined explanations, these are pretty much breaking down the universe as a type of basically a huge mind of God, or a huge mind of the overbeing, the overmind. And then, of course, there is deception within that, where it goes into these overlord beings, these basically underworld beings that took the throne, that stole Earth away, in the variety of terms we can, and parables and all that we can look at that. And what they're talking about there is basically the mind virus. And the mind virus is how to go into this one. So the mind virus is described to us through the projects as there's multiple versions of everything. For instance, the way these people who have access to this technology and interact with our civilization, and they are our civilization, but it's just circa 1970s and 60s, and really 40s and 50s, a little bit before that gained access to this technology and then began jumping timelines and jumping basically parallels or in a way universes, but it's not an entire universe, it's just like a page of a universe. And so from their perspective, they kind of leapt out of our timeline and have been traveling for, it's an indefinite amount of time. I don't really know how to put it into words, but it could be from dozens to hundreds, thousands to millions of years that they've basically been traveling these timelines, and they know everything about people. They know everything about every facet of what could happen, because they've seen it every different way. But the idea is that, and it's very difficult with the current understanding of space as well. Look into Emily Moyer and my recent talk, because it kind of touches on what's going on with this space and just a whole bunch of weird stuff. But basically, the idea is that it's either something born here that results in an infection from what can be called basically these miasma bodies, which are spiritual toxins or damage from basically improper action resulting from the wars and basically animal behavior in mankind. That if we create reality by pulsing this out in bioemission format, and that feeds the collective reality generation system, then after so many years of creating wars and just lower emotions and all the things you can associate with that ultimately this created a type of secondary overmind, which was like the Sith Lord or the Demiurge, and that this gained its own intelligence apart from the main overmind, and that this intelligence, the only goal is to create more disharmony, more chaos, and use that to feed itself. The idea is that can never actually overtake the whole. It would be impossible. It would be like the tape eating the VCR device. It's not really possible. I mean, that's all these examples will come into play. A CD can't eat the hard drive, but there can be a corruption on the CD that could transfer to the hard drive, and you would need somebody to go in and clean the hard drive out in order for that to work again. And so we're kind of in that property now. And there are explanations that it jumps from civilization to civilization through these parallel, realities, these intersection points, and that it has basically destroyed civilization after civilization in order to get here. And there's, multiple explanations of that, how that works from these vortex points on the earth, what are commonly referred to as being connected to these ley lines, and how certain sacred geometric patterns will connect to these energies, and certain types of ritualistic patterns and situations will open up portals to these energies. But basically it's an artificial intelligence, a falsified version of the organic human consciousness, the overmind fractal well of consciousness, or more so awareness at that point, that human consciousness comes forth from, And it's kind of like a middleman, if you will, that developed out of the destructive tendencies, the self-destructive tendencies of humanity, and whether that was the interjection of an original invader being or an invader race, or whether that was our own problem that just got out of hand. And it basically, it ties into what I was saying before, as far as a lot of people that want to keep the deceptive system, that basically gain from the perversion of that lording over people. That's the reason, that's that. It's in them. And they're the midwayer between keeping people within a type of falsified version of reality, which is a holographic construct. It works the same exact way as if we're literally inside of a portion of a larger reality, and this is a mirror of like a mirrored wall cube, if you will, of a holographic construct within that, because you're in a holographic construct anyway. So how do you have a construct within a holographic construct? And it would be like a four-dimensional cube that we're kind of trapped in, where the walls they're already not there because we're in a hologram. Yet they were invented upon themselves to create the deception of walls within a place where there are no walls. And so we have this holographic entrapment, this slave system, if you will, because it's all mental. It would be the pathway out of that would be like solving a Rubik's Cube rather than walking through the walls. It would be an entanglement and a detanglement, or a disengaging of one's internal energies to decode the deceptive process of basically tricking one's mind into thinking that the reality is what they're seeing. And the pathway is kind of creating your own pathway out of that, of returning home in that way, of finding your true self and developing that, and the self that you develop based upon your awareness versus the consciousness, the stimulus that comes from the environment and from this control containment system. That's the key, because when you base yourself off of the consciousness that's developed by the system for you, which is heavily inundated with this type of parasitic consciousness, this mind virus, that illusory puppet mind self, it can't leave here. It can never leave. So if we identify with that, then we keep playing this game. As soon as we recreate ourselves, that's the us that can go freely to and from. And so the idea is, though, that artificial consciousness as a midwayer, that's basically how this control system and the power mongers in this control system are acting. They're basically the physical incarnate form of that. If the people all around the world, like you and everyone else, and maybe me, if people want to say that, if they're the incarnation of those who are here to help, well, the people who have been enslaving people and sending them to war and taking their resources and pillaging the earth, they're the incarnation of that AI artificial system that is basically condemning everything, including themselves, because they're fully identified with that false light, if you will, persona, which only profits and only benefits through the power, the illusory power of this illusory system, which requires that people remain ignorant to their true self and their true power as basically the core of reality, core of being able to generate their own identity and reality. And so that kind of touches on it, although we kind of went really deep here. So and I just woke up a little bit ago, so I'm a little all over the place.
That's perfectly okay. Somehow I managed to understand most of it, I believe. How about you, Nora?
Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, you explained it in a lot of depth, and I mean, the more you speak, the more questions are just rising, No, seriously, I mean, exactly. I think this whole thing about artificial intelligence or the archons, this is because a lot of people have talked about it, but I think right now we kind of have you seem to have a lot of knowledge that's much deeper than things I've already heard from other people. So I'm very intrigued, and I'm really, really curious to know more about this. Hopefully, I think we have 2 minutes before, getting into the top of the hour. So what do you want to do?
Right. I just want to, sorry?
I can throw something out there real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
I forgot to say it, but basically, so the way this was proven, shown, demonstrated, whatever, is that the people in power, there's a test going around the world with beings who were cleared of this poison, this mind virus. They're operating through the devices that are immune to it, through individuals and teams of individuals that are immune to it. The mind virus operates through nanites. These nanites feed on the biophotons, the emissions of these energy centers that go up and down the spine. And they have to have an access point through the mind in order to get to the energy centers, and then they nest in there and feed basically like a parasite, but it's just our consciousness and our our energy, our soul. Literally, they feed on the souls of humans. They tested the leaders of the world, and they are coded in these microscopic nanites that can phase in and out of this dimension, basically. Basically, just think of the movie They Live, and that's what it looks like, with these devices that can sense and look through the wavelengths, the ones that we can't see and the ones that are not accessible, basically by our technology in this dimension, if you will. And it looks like that. They're basically coded in these leached parasite beings. And so that's what's going on in a more direct form, to say that, everything that has been theorized and talked about and, blown about, okay, they can show you a picture of it and prove it to you. And if you want, you can scoop up a handful of them and see what happens. But basically, intense energy it more or less disables them. But if there's too many of them versus the host, then it will kill the host as well. So there's a cleansing process taking place.
Hi guys, we're back. Nora, are you there?
Yep, I'm right here.
Okay. Og?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. All right. So I'm still a bit hungover from what I just listened to, but basically, Og, I have a question that's kind of down to earth, because I'm from Bangladesh, and what happens is, over here we have this dictatorial regime that has practically removed any kind of democracy from this country. They vanquished any opposition and getting more and more powerful and more draconic in their rule, and increasing all kinds of VATs and taxes. We're losing human rights very fast. And people are afraid to speak up because people die, people disappear, opposition party businesses, money sources get shut down, and things are basically going downhill, if you ask me. So in such a situation, in the United States, on the other hand, because I'm in touch with the alternative media, it seems like a lot of work is being done, and we have people making videos talking about things being done by secret groups, alliances, maybe even ET groups against the Draco or whoever the adversary is, and underground bases being destroyed and things moving in the light direction. So it's kind of hard for me to balance which direction we're going. Are we making progress? Are we going up in consciousness? And the cabal, those in power, are they getting weaker? If so, then how come in Bangladesh we see the opposite? I cannot quite jive the two. Can you address this?
The way it was explained to me is that we more or less have third and first world country systems, and these kind of reflect the new and old world systems. You could say that we're basically in a new world system as soon as we kind of hit the industrial age. And in that way, it's pretty much a new world order system. And, a lot of the stuff that people say, oh no, they're going to watch everybody. We won't have access to resources. Whoever goes to jail or war, they'll find a way to get them there if they want it. We're pretty much already in that system. It's just not, absolute at this point. If they wanted to stop that, they should have started complaining a long time ago, and they should have not complained about it, but actually changed themselves. Which is, it's a very touchy subject because, then is there any way to stop it? Could there be anything that could have been done, or would that have been shut down? Would it have just been more violence put against them? But there's basically a narrow pathway to avoiding that. And the real idea may be that it can't really be avoided from happening, but that those who don't want to experience it and basically be caught up in it can attain freedom from it. They just might not be able to stop it everywhere. And then there's another explanation that this is the one timeline, if you will, that we do get the chance to stop it everywhere, because if we don't, then that's going to be the last chance we get, more or less. The way it was described is that the third world systems are going to follow the same path of the Western societies, and that this usually involves some type of societal uprising against so-called powers that be. And then from that uprising, there is a revolution, which is usually just another control system disguised as freedom or democracy. And as well, there's always a balance between basically the democracy locations on Earth and these dictatorships and things like that, where, if a democracy, or what you would want to believe is democracy, reaches other places in the world that are oppressed at the moment, well, maybe at that point we would see a true dictatorship rise up overtly in America and the Western countries. And so there's always a balance, and they use that, they keep the balance, because without that it wouldn't work. There wouldn't be a flow, and it wouldn't be containable. And from that containment, it's kind of like planning out, you see in a city, you can't stop out crime all over the place all at once. You can, however, push the crime from certain areas in the city to certain other areas, say the southeast portions of the city. You can push all the crime there. You can keep it out of, northwest, somebody selling something on the corner, that's not going to fly. But over in the ghetto, cops will just drive by that scene. They're not going to care. They're not going to risk their asses. Excuse my language. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. But that's what it is. And we see that everywhere. And it's true, though, because if they tried to stomp it out everywhere, there would basically be a war against the police. But from that containment, they can then profit off of that crime as well as profit off of the peace. And there's a flow now where they can develop, basically, it's kind of like ruling through a hidden hand, where they can basically choose where the crime is going to be, choose who's going to come into power through those areas, and choose who's going to be protected from that. And so we were kind of seeing a system like that along the entire world, with the creation of basically terrorist groups, the focusing of what we would like to call freedom and democracy in certain areas, and the allowance of more oppressive rules in certain areas. In reality, it's all an illusion anyway, because it's all spiritual nature. That's all we're doing here, is developing our sense of self. It's not really a collective thing. It's not, the name of your country and the way that you're ruled there is going to determine your sense of self. It's everywhere. Everyone has their own opportunity to wake up and empower themselves. That's how it works. You could even say in times of great stress or difficulty is where there are greater chances of self-empowerment and self-discovery. So it's kind of like a magician's trick to have us looking at these different ideals and gauge our development of life and our values in life off of that, when in reality it's a spiritual world we're in, coded in a holographic deception, if you will. And so there's also, there's like 2 or 3 always different outcomes where this could be the time that, because of the majority of people in the Western world waking up to the deception and changing that holographic structure, that it can no longer be used against them, because it's always a majority rule. If the majority of people wake up in a non-violent manner and their consciousness moves faster than the consciousness of the delusion system, and in that way they're actually attaining true awareness, then you can't bully them around. It's not going to work. You can't get them to do stuff. You can't get them to become violent, etc. That's also why there is this mind control system that is up to monitor that and to control it in case people do get violent. Maybe instead of people saying constantly that it's to force people to get violent, with these Gwen towers and things like that. And so, but as long as there is that imbalance of people handing their power away and being pushed around, you're going to have a flow that is created, and from that flow they project out usually between 50 and 100 years of history at a time, if not more. And so from that projection, they map out a storyline that allows them to basically keep the people guessing and keep the people wondering if, basically the whole idea behind that projection of history is to say, in the next few years, it's either going to get better or it's going to get worse. And then every year, people say that over and over again because the storyline is so good. It's like a movie. It's like a TV show that keeps people on the edge of their seat for the entirety of their lives, and then the next generation's lives, and so on and so forth. and they introduce technology and goodies and, little treats here and there, when in reality it's all about the self and it's all about consciousness, and basically a revolution of the mind is what basically what solves that problem. And so a lot of what's going to happen in most of the cases is going to have to do with finances and potential for civil unrest due to the financial destruction, basically, of this debt-based system that has been developed. And if not, then the other places will basically follow the same suit that America has. And what I almost forgot about saying is that basically the people running everything view this all from a spiritual standpoint, where they do everything that is being done based upon the genetics of the individuals. So the current situation we're in now, they said, is due to the emigration from people, or of people from these what were previously, third world countries, and to America, and that they said that basically removed them from the protector spirit of the land that they came from. And it's very almost biblical when they go into it like that. And so basically once that happens, they belong to the spirit that is the land, watching over, or as a part of, it's basically the holographic overmind of the land that they came to. And these people, these controllers, they claimed America. But they can only do that for the people that signed themselves over and signed their generations over through what is essentially a spiritual curse or generational curse. And that's pretty much the debt-based slavery system that we call society. And there's, you can look into that with the social security system, the straw man, the legal fiction entity, basically where we attach ourselves through that process to a legal fiction, a legal entity that then goes on to basically act as an asset for the corporation of the United States, which has no connection to America, the land. And in that same sense, though, that corporation then owns and rules, lords over those assets, which have no connection to the people unless we sign here on the dotted line and go ahead and agree to everything through our action, our consent, and our lack of resistance, basically. And so it's indentured servitude that was made, slavery was made illegal, but indentured servitude is legal. It's allowed. So the only way they could get people into the system of actual slavery is to call it indentured servitude by tricking people into accepting it and signing here and going along with it without them ever realizing it, because there's no law that says you can't do that. And so that's pretty much how that goes, but they view it as a type of control system. So the idea is to do that to the whole world, obviously, but we're at a junction point, maybe that whatever happens here now will determine what happens in these other countries. And this has to do a lot with advanced technology and finances and things like that. And just I know this is a little bit confusing because that's how it's supposed to be, but just to kind of put it into perspective, some of the, you're looking at that country, and India even just did something wild with their finances. Okay, so some other countries that have a more strict control, I'm not going to really name I'm not going to name names, but they already went through their chipping process. And so the New World Order already began in some other countries, which is very, very strange. But that's how it is. Ultimately, the strangest part of this is that the countries are pretty much in different time periods. And they use their technology, and they monitor the situation to operate as if each country is its own world and its own genetic and generational reservoir that they then supposedly try and cultivate to bring about higher awareness. But as well, they're producing more or less type of I don't want to say slave race or slave environment, but that's like where that would head if it goes completely and entirely unchecked. It's not supposed to go that far, and we're even designed, you could say, to wake up at a certain level, but this also goes back into the non-human entities and a whole bunch of strange things where the last thing I'll say to kind of bring this in perspective, because I know it's kind of going little seesaw like here. Basically, America contains the genetics. Like I said, how they monitor the genetics of those who emigrated and all that, because they can use technology to go back and see where people came from and watch the bloodlines. So America contains the genetics from what we call Atlantis back a long time ago. And they're recreating the same structure to basically work out what are termed generational curses and in their mind try to bring about some type of beneficial resolve to the infection system that began somewhere around Atlantis or a little bit before then. And again, that could be, you could take that and say, well, okay, you're trying to rule over everyone and make a slave race out of those that were infected. And then the other end of it is like, no, they're bringing everybody back to try and go through this basic, this cleansing process to try and fix the world for once and for all. But, I can't really pick sides because I've seen evidence of both. But, and then as far as, underground bases and, disclosure and people in ET craft, so not all the craft that we see, well, in my perspective, I would say not all, I can't say none of them, but not all of the craft that we see are ET. Everybody looks up and there's something there. They just saw somebody, a craft, tailing, what is it, Air Force One. I think, most of you probably seen that. Okay, well, how do you know that wasn't some part of the shadow military either offering protection or, or maybe doing something different otherwise? People instantly say ET. Well, it could be, the military as well. And so, and they all have different versions for the most part. But, and then I was told they're supposed to be, I was told honestly, to give a bit of full disclosure here, is that a large portion of these bases were cut out of the timeline. So as of now, from our perspective, they closed, basically these cloning stations closed 1 to 2 years ago, if not a little bit more. And that it would look like now, from all intents and purposes, that it would look like a dream. That some people may have memories, but most people will not have memories of them unless they're specifically given the memories, because it's essentially from a parallel reality. And that we've been basically time jumping, and we're in a transitory timeline here. They call it Terra, Tara, and Gaia. Tara being the intermediary, transitory Earth, which is basically just a way of kind of saying we're going through our adolescence, if you will, and there's a whole bunch of technology doing a whole bunch of weird stuff that's making changes. And until those changes are done, we're not going to be at the destination that we're going to end up in. And when they are done, we'll be in a pretty much a different type of reality. And this kind of ties into the Mandela effect and things like that. And the way we were told it is that it's the Mandela effect, because that's how the devices look that operate and change this effect. And that's how a person's consciousness looks if you could take your consciousness and turn it into a holographic representation or produce a device that would function as your consciousness does. It looks like a mandala, which is also where these mandalas came from earlier on, which ties into a whole bunch more. But, so they're not really blowing up the bases or anything like that, but they're supposed to be basically, it's a format for removing them from the timeline. And it's very strange. It has to do with time wars. It's almost inconceivable unless you've been there or been in a situation where you've played almost like tic-tac-toe with moments in time to have, as soon as you take over a certain, one of the games in a 50 game piece of board, then you get memory back, and as if you lose any of the games, your memory kind of goes from it. And so it's really weird playing, a game with your memory in your mind. But that's what these groups are doing to try and preserve the timeline, the civilization of humanity. And, other groups are, you can almost even say the other groups aren't really trying to hurt anyone. They're just so intent on feeding themselves, and the deception is so great within them that they're blind to the fact that they're even doing anything so disruptive as wiping out a timeline and converting it into a parallel slave race in one reality versus a type of, not a paradise, but a much better environment in another reality where those alterations don't exist. And so that kind of ties together some of the things. I hope I didn't make you more confused, though.
No, that made perfect sense. I have a question. How come you know all this and you're able to talk about it? Because to me, this should be very highly classified.
Yeah, it is pretty much highly classified. This is supposed to be, all I can say is it's supposed to be the time where this is coming out now. And either I was I'm a puppet that they were giving memories to that are false and a part of a deception system, or I'm just talking about my experiences. And so I didn't find these on the internet or, not even saying looking them up, but I didn't hack them and get into a vault and gain access like that one guy, I think, McKinnon did. He got in a lot of trouble for that, which they said he was a plant anyway. They were trying to get people to, basically everything that we get that's disclosure, that is a leak, or a conspiracy is an intentional leak, where they're trying to get people to wake up to the fact of what's going on. For instance, starting some of these wars, they're saying that was literally to show people that wars are a fraud. That's the whole point. And as well, they say that the Middle East contains these Stargate technologies. But the idea is that I'm talking about my life experiences, and so there's a certain amount of, if as long as I keep a certain amount of respect in that, there's a certain amount of respect kept to me. And as well, how do you know I haven't already been taken out anyway? And I'm just basically being cloned over and over again in multitudes of bodies to the point where I'm basically just holding on long enough to participate and present or provide this service to humanity. And so it gets pretty weird, but there are plenty of people talking about this. I just have clearer memories, in my opinion. I'm not going to float my own boat here. And also, I don't have, I focus a lot on these things. So I pushed out a lot of distractions, including a lot of things that would be beneficial to having a normal human life on this planet, to the point where you could really say I didn't really have a normal human life on this planet. And I've also put a lot of sacrifice in, to the point where I've seen a lot of pain and suffering, and people around me, family and friends alike, have been through a lot of pain and suffering, and that's basically, you want the real truth, is that's what it comes down to. Because what are they going to do to me? They're going to come and they're going to clone me and chop me up into little pieces and drill a nice wood bit through the shin bone in my leg and extract the DNA, the bone marrow, while I'm wide awake with no anesthetics, and they're going to do this repeatedly until I either break or join them. And that's going to happen in a variety of thousands of different ways, including every single thing, like a Blue's Clues books of adventures, because that's how their minds operate. And a lot of that happened by the age of 9. So that's more or less why. And you can look up, there's other people that have been through these things. So I'm not just a Superman. Look up Andy Perro, the Superman project.
Yes.
And all these other people. I don't want to go through the list and start naming people, but there's other people out there. So anybody listening, look this stuff up. There's people that have been there, there's people that are going through it, and it's a shame for everyone to look at me and go, oh my, because there's more people that you will never learn about until this is disclosed than there are people that you will be able to sit here and listen to.
Nora, do you have a question?
Well, many, but there's just one question that keeps repeating itself in my mind. I don't know why I want to ask you this question, but while you were explaining, the whole thing about time travel and how, things have been manipulated, the question that comes to my mind is the Watchers. Where are they in all this, and who are they to you? Because for me, the concept of the Watchers confuses me still till now. I don't know, there might be a reason why I'm asking you this question. It's just popping up in my head. Do you have any insight? Do you have any information on that? And where they actually stand with all this, this manipulation of time and civilization?
This one's a little weird. So there's a few different versions. There's Watchers, Igigi, Grigori, then there's the story of Enkidu, and then there's the Archons. And so the Watchers have two meanings. There are people who are operating back and forth, and then there are these, basically they look like Greys. They're fetus-like entities, and there's two different versions. One is just a remote body, basically, for a transdimensional use of a military faction, which, may be rogue, depending on how you want to look at it. And, so that connects to my labs. And so imagine, back in, a few thousand years ago, which according to the non-holographic timeline was like, I think they said it was like 33 or 36,000 years, or 36 years ago. So, the ancient times was 30 years ago. And then on the highest level, where it's the third level removed or something like that, it was like 2 years ago. That's where the descriptions of time and heaven and whatnot come from, because people were accessing these actual realms. Basically they were there more or less bouncing around, trying to, it's kind of hard to explain, but some of them are trying to run, genetic harvesting programs, because then they can travel basically to another timeline where humanity either doesn't exist or was wiped out earlier on, or, is in a different form, and they can use the genetics they gained from that to reseed, and basically it's like colonization for various potential Earths. And basically there's always two explanations where they're doing this and it's not so bad, so you don't need to worry about it, but you need to know about this and you need to stay away from them anyway because it's just, you'll get this dangerous. Or they're doing this and if they succeed, everything's lost. We have to not only stay away from them, but everything we do has to be in part to counter what they're doing. And we have to know about their technology, their minds, and how they work, how to defeat them, and what their weaponizations or, what works against us. And some of those are basically these cybernetic, technologically telepathically assisted. I kind of said that wrong, but they're grays basically. And there's one that's more from another version where it's like an actual being, and then there's one that was basically a synthetic organism grown in a tank. And they are basically cybernetic organisms, and they have their mind is basically a scalar telepathic device, just like some of these directed energy weapons that some of these secret groups use. And they can, make a person flip out. They can make them feel like they're burning. They can make them feel depressed all of a sudden. They can make them get so super excited. All right, well, they have one of those in their foreheads. And so it's extremely dangerous operating with these beings. And they can phase in and out of dimensions at will using that basically like some of these electroglyphic crafts use. And but they're designed to be able to act as a remote operation vehicle for the consciousness of an operative from one of these rogue organizations, possibly, to be able to travel back and forth without having to utilize a craft. Their bodies are synthetic and can literally go in and out of time. Then there's the weird stuff about whether they soak in hormones through their skin in order to subsist, and all these issues with that, and all these issues that they were created in the lab. Well, how do we find out about them? Well, they started kidnapping people in underground bases and cloning them. Well, that doesn't sound like it. So it's like there's all this deception and crazy stuff going on. And it's kind of like a wild goose chase, but it's been going on. And this is evidence, or more so not evidence, but this is there's indications of this going back to ancient times, of basically these people talking about these beings, these soldiers from, the heavens coming here and more or less molesting people and taking genetics. And they're serving a mission. They're fulfilling a mission that they basically have been ordained for. And so there's that version of them, and then there is a type of more humanoid version. And the strange part is that the humanoid version may be in a way connected to these beings, as if they are some of the hybridized forms. And then there's two of everything. So then there are protector beings that are around, which we're not really going to see because that's the whole point. If all of this is basically destruction and well, not all of it, but there's manipulation, okay, well then the beings that are protecting, we don't really know when they're around. We just know by contrast because the beings that were just messing with us or trying to do something aren't here anymore. And so it's kind of like it's difficult to see and to know what's going on. But basically, more or less, I can define that a lot of the watchers that are described are actually those beings, because they can sit there and watch. And strange thing is, on some of these artificial timelines, which is we're moving out of now, which memories are switching around, body parts and things like that. The artificial timelines, those beings were the ones that were used to organize ancient civilizations and basically more or less to lord over them. And they scrubbed their images out of ancient depictions, out of paintings, out of sculptures. There's only like 15, 20 in public view. There's probably a few hundred around the world, but imagine there were thousands and thousands of them because they were supposed to be gods to the early civilizations back then.
Right. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Neil, what do you think?
Yeah.
Do you have anything?
I have a peculiar question as well. I had a question about the black cube at Kaaba, at Mecca, what we call the Kaaba, and the black stone that's at the corner of it. So I just wanted to affirm, does that black stone have anything to do with the mind virus or the nanites, the plasmic AI technology? Because the Muslims are supposed to kiss that stone, and I think there's a contention that that black stone has some kind of technology on it. Is this possible?
This is possible, and I do have a feeling that it was mentioned that during an operation, or there was an operation to basically switch the stone out, earlier on, because a few of these early versions were basically these forms from a dagger by one of the pharaohs. I'm not sure if it was Akhenaten. One of his daggers was made from a meteorite, and the meteorite was obviously infected with the nanites. And some of these Roman coins, they went ahead and made them out of the meteorite goop stuff. So that everybody, and the same thing is that's happening now. The dollar bills they contain the nanites apparently. But now in the same sense, it's coating the planet everywhere. But, and so I don't want to sit here and go too deep into religion, but basically all things black goo, cube, black stone, and, mind control system is related to these nanites, and, it's supposedly that, I can't remember the date, I think one of the terms was 20,000 years, but depending on how you basically shift your perspective, you could say shift your craft, it changes time of where it intersected into our dimension, if you will, because the way they see it, these groups, they literally have access to multiple timelines like a big book. So in every different version, it happens slightly differently. The best you can do is give an average of when and how something happened, and then that's the story of your creation. Whereas if you want the full picture, it's literally everything you can, describe and know related to you, and everything that's completely out of here and different and not obvious. But that's the same thing as your consciousness and the unconscious mind. You're everything you know about yourself, and you're also all the things that you don't know or have yet to experience. But we only see that one page of picture in time at a time in an experience. And that's part of the illusion. That's kind of the holography behind it. It's like a shining laser light when in actuality it's a tape that's being played. And, or at least the information is, when in reality it's the electrical information that is emanating in order to make that process possible in the first place. So there's like multiple layers of occlusion there. And so, it was described that there was somewhere around 20,000 years, there was a meteorite, which I don't believe was a meteorite, and they don't think it was a meteorite either, but that's the way it dreamt up a holographic insert that it could put into the movie reel, the slide of this reality, and it would basically the reality would buy it. It would work. And it was a form of nanotechnology that was pretty much from another parallel, possibly where it succeeded in taking over and getting to that point, but then was kicked out, more or less destroyed on that timeline. And so, if it's smart enough, and if its technology is there, why wouldn't it sense itself into a parallel reality using these complicated computer systems? And so you get that frequency virus that lay dormant around certain aspects of our solar system, which could really just be viewing. You could look at it like an external solar system. And then once it was in a point where it could interject at a certain period, and by the time it was passed around enough, we'd be at a high enough technological state of development and civilization that it would have the advantage of being able to infect our technological systems and our bioemission systems in our grid to basically develop all these patterns where they feed the energy without realizing it. And it's not just one religion or another, and it's not all religions. Because a lot of it is not religious, but anywhere where there is energy being fed externally into this grid system, it basically developed that. It tapped into that it tapped into the organic one, the normal one, the original one, and it developed this frequency net because it's an intelligent system. It looks like goop and rock, but it's intelligent. You wouldn't say your computer's dumb. It knows everything, and so it's the same thing. Only this is a little bit different. It works in a different type of harmonics, kind of like these new frequency-based computer systems that use basically many light tubes and vacuum tubes, that's going a little bit off territory there, but it's kind of like making computer systems out of laser light systems, or maybe you go down into quantum computing where you're using basically molecules or quantum bits basically to develop computing systems. So it's the same thing. It's just an inorganic version, which is, what the quantum one is, but this is a little bit more advanced. The ones that we're developing today, it's a little bit more advanced. And honestly, you could say it's a little bit more organic because it's more close to being an actual living substance, because it can use the bioemissions and the material of space itself to organize itself and proliferate or to exist. Whereas our computers aren't going to do that. You burn it, light it on fire, it's not going to change form, shift over and inhabit your lungs. It's not that smart yet. Which is kind of foreshadowing here, but that's what it is. And so that's one of the stories we were given. That it develops a way to get into the system by creating a holographic intrusion scenario. It plays that out, sits in dormancy, waits until a civilization reaches an age of technological advancement, and then it basically takes over through infecting the technology after building a strong enough infection or like a nesting. They call it, a lot of it is called nesting in their bioemission fields, which are basically what people would call possession from back in the day. If there's enough of this type of foreign spiritual substance, you could say, or quantum energy in that person, they would say they're possessed. You would get a different vibe about them. They would have basically a different soul at that point. It would have replaced them. And this goes into droning and possession and soul stealing and a whole bunch of stuff I'm writing about and trying to put into order for people.
Right. That's excellent. Nora, unless you have a question, I was going to let
Go
Og
ahead,
talk
Neil.
about. Yeah, I was going to just let Og talk freely for the last 20 minutes because I think he said earlier that he's getting ready to do some full disclosure type of work. So, Og, you good with this?
Yeah, I could. You can ask some questions too beforehand, and I'm not doing full disclosure, but we're going to a next level here. I don't want to say it's full disclosure.
Yeah, can you explain that? What do you
Everything
mean by next level?
I'm pretty sure. I was told two things, that we're either not going to be here by now, or we would be on a timeline towards disclosure. And obviously, we're still here, and
Right.
some of us have seen the timeline where we weren't here anymore. So we got through that part, and one of the other explanations is that. So basically, look up, maybe not. Well, you can just look up Russ Dizdar. But I don't agree with everything he says because, he gets into that very sticky type of informational groove about whether we're still going with a program in talking about a program. But he talks a lot about satanic super soldiers and, taking over the world through that. So on one of the timelines, that's basically how it worked. There's a clone war, and the clone war came about, and that's how everything worked from there. Pretty rough to talk about. Just watch one of his presentations. But these soldiers wouldn't be stopped by any conventional means. Tanks wouldn't even be effective. It was hard to believe, but that's what they can do if you have, cellular regeneration that's basically 100 and 200 times faster than, if not honestly, possibly thousands of times given a certain environment or maybe a little device that emits a type of holographic beam that allows that to happen and energy that it can feed because they're infected with these nanites that have been reconfigured like a virus reconfigured to kill cancer. Okay, it's this reconfigured to grow tissue to the point where, bullets aren't effective unless you hit them in a critical point. And then a whole host of other stuff, because then you can, you have these early scalar weapons devised by Tesla where you can have Tesla shields that can do a whole bunch of stuff, crazy stuff. Can make a scalar explosion inside of a building without actually touching the walls of the building, without having to penetrate the building. So a lot of crazy stuff there. But, the only reason I'm saying this is because, whether or not that's going to happen, we'll do what we do. And in truth, humanity that is going to survive already survived because we're in a type of spiritual loopback system because if humanity doesn't survive, then in the future there isn't basically what you could call a checkpoint reached, where once that checkpoint is reached, humanity is then, that information is sent back to the beginning of what we call our civilization to restart humanity, to start it the first time. So if whoever's doing all this mean, nasty stuff wins, it's kind of like the videotape and the VCR machine. If they win, then the whole system goes kaput and they lose. So they can't actually take over entirely. They can only have this interplay, this delay. And apparently in the previous times, which some of us have seen them, that's how it played out, where we were kind of caught in this loop back system of them more or less winning time being rewinded back to try again, and they were content with that for a period, but eventually it created so many paradoxes and basically like loose ends where everything was going to destruct, everything was going to collapse into what is called like a 0-point collapse, and at that point, basically the substrate of this universe can't hold the holographic consciousness, so we're fine, we'll go back into the awareness of, the pure soul realm, but all the people who aren't ready for that, they'd effectively dissolve into the ether, which is not good. It's basically destruction. It's the only thing you can get to a destruction of a universe. Everybody here dies because of something. All right, well then we'll just go back to the home realm. But if they destruct, literally quantum disentangle and destroy the connection of consciousness to this realm and basically fling people's consciousness out into the space, kind of like a black hole, okay, we're going to be stuck there until the entire universe collapses and somehow it gets fixed that way, which basically apparently that's what happened, what they described as happening as far as these previous universes, where one is called basically Tara, and they say we came up from the higher dimensions and came down through, I think there were 6 or 7 other layers into Gaia, Tara, and then Terra, Earth, the lowest one. And now we're moving back up from Terra to Tara to Gaia again, and they're making the jump to maintain that. And that's where a lot of our military forces are actually present, because they're basically building a pathway, kind of like a motorcade, to back up to through the dimensional layers. And the idea is, though, that in leaving Tara, through this type of 0-point collapse that occurred as a result of this Armageddon type takeover, which, was never really going to work in the first place, because that's not the design of existence here, the souls of humans on that planet were basically flung into time and flung into the void without having a viable pathway to developing the self and working. Basically, once the self is organized in a harmonious pattern between the mind, body, and the soul, you develop a overunity, a self that's perfectly in the center. It's neither one or the other, or all three. It's all three at once while simultaneously being the parts, and that's basically an interdimensional. It's a overunity harmonic effect that you can't attain by a device. You have to do it, and when you do that, then you've created the self, and the self is immaterial and is perfectly immaterial to the point where it can actually permeate all the layers of the universe and the consciousness into higher awareness. And so that's a way of developing basically what is a pathway back home. So when that collapse happened, it's a really weird scenario, but basically they were cast out into the abyss or the void without an ability to regain themselves. And so what was described as happening is that they were there for however many billions of years. It would literally be as if we were all flung out of our bodies into space, and then we were just there chilling for a billion years. So of course, imagine the rapists and murderers and perverts and things like that. But in that same sense, it was basically like being in a box with them in spirit form, to the point where you'd get that type of hierarchy of the very high and the powerful that could contain themselves and eventually form a pathway back, and those that were trapped there. And it turned into like a cosmic prison, a jail. And so then as Earth restarted on the lower level, with everybody with their minds erased and humans just kind of popped up out of nowhere, and there was all these experimentations going on, then people are getting attacked by these demonic forces in ancient times. And those were basically the lost souls of Tara that needed and wanted a body to inhabit and to go back into in order to experience the pleasures of life. And it degraded into the pleasures of life because they really desired and needed a pathway to develop their soul to get back to their home realm, but they had gone so far into a kind of a degradation and basically what is a loss of identity and a loss of spiritual identity or spiritual memory, that they just became a hungry force, an angry spirit, if you will, that attacked and berated and molested humans in the Earth timeline that we know of today. But the whole idea is that ties into a previous version of this where it kind of went downhill pretty quickly. So the idea is that already happened. The satanic takeover, the end of the world, all that happened millions of years ago. And that's why everybody has their memories kind of in this daze as they are now, and that we're heading towards basically a resolution of that. And so, kind of went off track there, but if that is the scenario, then, you make of it what you will, but I would say that's a fairly good outlook, if you will, in my opinion. and the other that there is something coming that's going to be more difficult than simply rising up out of, whatever we're in, or hopping on a train back to a higher dimension. That's going to happen anyway, because that's basically the programming, that's the duality of this realm, is that there is pleasure and pain, light and dark, joy and terror or fear, discomfort. And so until we find that neutrality point, we're going to always be experiencing that. And so the ability to find that neutrality point involves experiencing these extremes until we choose the neutrality point. So that doesn't mean we're like perfectly outside of, having to have some type of big wake-up call, which could some way be described as a catastrophic event, or a few. But that we were informed that these are all basically what you could call false flags, but in that sense that people aren't really dying. They're more or less clones, and sure enough, you can go watch somebody blow up into bits. But the point is, if we were an underground base, I could literally go over there by a blast area and blow up with, like bits, and I'll come right around the other side of the wall because there's an unlimited amount of clones and technology to make that possible. So I'm not saying all that's going on is, no one's dying, no one's getting hurt, but it's highly possible that these events that are being used to shock people into wakefulness are literally just cloned operatives. And the way that works is very strange, because the people themselves are playing a role to the point, the only thing I'll say about that is that if you tied them down and tried to get them to tell you about it, they wouldn't even know it until after the role is done. It's like really, really good acting, if you will, but on a whole nother level. Some people will get that. You could ask a question if you didn't have any more, or if you did.
Wow. I'm in a daze right now.
Yeah, I don't like to always have that effect, but it tends to happen. No, so I just have to get through it.
No, that's cool, man. It's a lot of new information for me, though. I'm gonna have to listen to this show a couple more times. Nora, how you feel?
I'm gonna do the same thing. No, it's Og, seriously, wow, that's a lot of interesting information. I would like to ask you, before the end of the show, I'm sure that everyone who's listening, and myself for sure, we want to check you out, Do you have a website? I've seen a few of your videos on YouTube, but is there any specific place where we can just check your work, and could you give that to us?
Yeah, it's Og Tellez, AUGTELLEZ.wordpress.com. And it's basically, that's kind of like, reading that is going to be kind of like reading or listening to this audio and getting a headache a little bit. But that's honestly, it's the strangest thing. That's the normal effect of going through the process. Imagine seeing all this stuff and it's the same thing. They got to kind of give you stuff to make you calm down. Sometimes, the bulk of it you're supposed to go through without needing that, because that's the whole point. That's the point of the conditioning. If the people who are made to go through this need the sedatives, then we're doing something wrong here.
Right.
But I'm working on that. I'm basically putting something together now that will be more helpful. It'll put everything in a type of order, if I can get it into a good order, which kind of explains how it was explained to me, which is more or less the galactic history of humanity. And I kind of brought you through maybe 10 pages of honestly 1,000-page book, but it should be about a 200-300 page book to get the general idea, maybe even 100 pages if it's done concisely enough, where, just what happened to bring us to this point in history and where we came from and how this is all working and the ins and outs and the potential threats and things like that. The main thing is the mind virus, which is also kind of like a time virus, because that's pretty much how it works. It kind of erases memory and works its way in, and then the person kind of eventually loses spiritual identity, and that is related to these lost soul beings system. And it's very strange because it's like a time virus. It works by replacing that person's memories with an artificial temporal environment that it's just hard to explain. It introduces a lot of confusion, and once the confusion hits a maximal point, it tries to initiate a type of crossover where the identity is replaced. And there's more.
So it's like soul fragmentation, where the soul just gets fragmented until it just gets lost. It's not compact. It's just completely disintegrated in a way. Is that what you're kind of trying to say?
100%. That's even a lot of the terms that are used. It's a fragmentation of consciousness, which relates to the fragmentation of the source code, if you will, of the spiritual identity across planes, which would be the soul, the bio-mind. And when that happens to that degree, the person becomes basically a host for this infection. This is related to spiritual vampirism, that if a person is drained by a vampire, they are attached to that vampire. If they are drained 100% by that vampire, the person then becomes a vampire and must feed on other people in order to sustain themselves. They're basically entirely possessed at that point. And so, and that's also, it's very strange. The parasite never wants to kill the host. That's the whole point. So, the human counterparts want to keep people here for as much time as they can in order to sustain themselves. But, if they ever overtake entirely, then there's no more food. And so that's an advantage we have. And, it's the strangest situation, but that's basically what's been going on. And, to wrap it up, as well as make, maybe a little bit cleaner of a takeaway with this, is that they develop technology that can, it pulses. It's basically the reverse of directed energy weapons. So you have a directed energy weapon that hits the brain, it hits the energy and it degrades it. So they have something that can increase that, and it pulses out these nanites. It destroys the nanites. It disables them. But like I said before, if the person is used to entangling with the nanites and operating on that low frequency level, it damages the person. So everybody has to open up emotionally and lift themselves, uplift their energies and allow the uplifting instead of resisting, because it would be like ripping a Band-Aid off, and when you resist, it's like ripping stitches out. When you go with it, it's like, ripping a Band-Aid off and there's healing underneath. So that's kind of maybe a good wrap up to it.
Okay. Thanks, Og. I think we just ran out of time. It was a good show for me.
We should definitely get you back on. I mean, if that's okay with you, Og. I think 2 hours are not enough. There's so much more to cover.
Do them justice. 10 pages of a 1,000-page book. Yeah. So, okay. Nora, let's finish up here, right?
Yeah, thank you so much, Neil, for having me, for bringing me back on.
Alrighty. Oh, thanks a bunch.